Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. The country's unemployment rate rises to 5.3% in July. The Philippine government renews its push for a free trade deal with the United States. And the international community condemns Israel's attacks on Hamas targets in Qatar. All that and more coming up. Let's take a look at how global financial markets performed overnight. U.S. stocks rose as healthcare giant United Health led gains, while a downward payroll revision strengthened expectations that the Federal Reserve will soon cut interest rates to support growth. The government reported the U.S. economy added 911,000 fewer jobs in the 12 months through March, a sign that hiring was already slowing, even before President Donald Trump imposed new global tariffs.
Today, we see the market essentially idle. I think we're going to see more neutral and sideways behavior up until the FOMC meeting next week. Investors have a lot to digest right now with the economic uncertainty, the massive revision downward for jobs with 911,000 less jobs created than we originally thought over the last year. Then we have to start questioning, what is the Fed going to tell us at that meeting? If they cut by 25 basis points, or do they cut by 50 basis points? If they cut by 50 basis points, are they going to admit that they were wrong and they are late to the party? And if they do only cut by 25 basis points, what are they going to signal about the economy going forward, particularly as it relates to the jobs market? Are they more concerned with the jobs market than they are with inflation? I think investors are, for the most part, going to be on the sidelines until we hear from the Fed next week in terms of their outlook for the economy and their outlook for interest rates.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed 0.4%, the S&P 500 up 0.3%, and the Nasdaq higher by 0.4%. In Europe, markets finished mixed. London's FTSE up by 0.2%, Germany's DAX went the other way, down by 0.4%, and France's CAC 40 higher by 0.2%. August's faster inflation is a reminder that the fight against price pressures isn't over, and it may push the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas to delay rate cuts until December, its final meeting of the year. This comes at a time when the economy is struggling to regain momentum and businesses are looking for lower borrowing costs to spur investment. Citi Philippines says the central bank still appears on track to bring policy rates down to 4.5% by the first quarter of 2026 from the current 5% level. The bank notes this outlook aligns with the less dovish signals BSP Governor Eddie Remolona Jr. gave during the August 28 policy meeting. Strong demand drives down the average rate of the 5-year Treasury bond in Tuesday's auction, a signal that investors are still hungry for government debt, even amid uncertainty over growth and inflation. Data from the Bureau of Treasury shows the yield dropped to 5.772% from 5.896% last July 1. The committee made a full award of 30 billion pesos, with bids swelling to 79.67 billion pesos, more than double the offer. Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation's chief economist, Michael Ricafort, says demand surged after the Treasury announced it will no longer issue major instruments like retail Treasury bonds or long-term notes for the rest of the year. Ricafort adds that the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas' recent 25 basis point rate cut also boosted the demand by lowering borrowing costs. Philippine manufacturing output slumped to a 5-month low in July, a warning sign for an economy that needs stronger industrial activity to sustain growth. Preliminary data from the Philippine Statistics Authority shows factory output measured by the Volume of Production Index dropped 1.1% year-on-year. That reverses the 7% growth recorded a year earlier, and the 1.6% expansion in June, marking the lowest level since February. The PSA says the contraction was driven by slower production of food, computer and electronics products, and transport equipment, key sectors that matter for both exports and domestic demand. Morocco customers could see lower power bills this September. A stronger peso is helping pull down generation charges, offering consumers a short respite from rising costs. The company says the drop is expected to offset cost recovery claims from San Miguel's power units, which start collecting 5.1 billion pesos over 6 months. Generation costs make up more than half of the monthly electric bill, so even a small shift would have a big impact. This would end 2 straight months of rate hikes, giving households and businesses some relief. Still, Morocco warns future rates could climb if it's forced to buy more expensive renewable energy certificates to meet the government's requirements. The Philippines is reviving its push for a free trade deal with the United States, with talks picking up under the Trump administration, amid rising tariff pressures that directly affect Philippine exporters. Ambassador Jose Manuel Romualdez says U.S. officials are now open to discussing an FTA, despite earlier signals that it was off the table. For now, Manila is seeking relief from steep tariffs on key exports like agriculture and semiconductors, 2 sectors that employ millions and drive the country's trade earnings. Former U.S. envoy John Negroponte also backed the move, calling it a fitting step for the alliance. Washington remains Manila's biggest export market, and Romualdez says ongoing talks with U.S. officials are aimed at securing fairer tariffs that could help keep Philippine products competitive. The Marcos administration may struggle to deliver on its flagship infrastructure program, with nearly half of projects now facing delays. The slowdown raises questions about whether the Build Better More agenda can still drive growth, create jobs, and boost competitiveness as promised. Out of 207 projects worth over 10 trillion pesos, only 7 have been completed so far, while many others are still behind schedule. Officials cite right-of-way disputes, funding gaps, and contractor issues as the key obstacles. The Transportation and Public Works departments are among the agencies with the most backlogs, including big-ticket airports, expressways, and flood control works that are crucial for trade and resilience. Public Works Secretary Vince Dizon vows to hold accountable those behind ghost flood control projects in Oriental Mindoro, a scandal that goes to the heart of how public funds are being spent. The secretary visited the province Monday with Governor Humerlito Dolor and found non-existent projects in 3 rivers, despite entries in the 2024 General Appropriations Act worth a total of 750 million pesos. Dizon has ordered the suspension of all flood control works in the province while full assessment is being conducted.
Ang purpose ng GAA na specific na ganyan is parang nga malaman natin kung saan yung proyekto. Kaya tayo may line item budgeting. Para may detalye dyan enough na para makita ng tao, malaman na meron ba o wala. Hindi ba? Yun ang purpose eh. So, guni-guni to. Walang proyekto nga ako nakikita dito. Nandito tayong lahat ngayon. Siguro naman, walang nag-hallucinate sa atin dito. Ang dami natin dito. Unless meron nakakita sa inyo na wala, baka meron may third eye sa inyo na may nakikitang flood control dito.
Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong and former Department of Public Works and Highways Secretary Rogelio Babes Singson are poised to sit in the 3-man independent commission that will probe alleged corruption in the government's flood control projects. That's according to a report by Politico.com. Sources say that both Magalong and Singson have already accepted President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s invitation. The official announcement is expected to take place this week. Marcos says the probe will spare no one, whether a political ally or rival. The president vowed that the independent panel will dig deep into the flood control mess until the problem is solved. Both Magalong and Singson have expressed willingness to join that body. The most corrupt in history. That's how Davao City Representative Isidro Ungab describes the 2025 national budget, putting a spotlight on just how deep the controversy has become. Ungab, a former House Appropriations Committee chair, told BNC's On Point that both houses of Congress are guilty of making budget insertions.
As early as pagpasa pa lang ng Bicameral Conference Committee report on this 2025 budget, nakita ko na yung blank items. There were 28 blank items covering 13 pages.
The lawmaker insists that the budget is unconstitutional, pointing to questionable allocations for the Department of Public Works and Highways.
The Constitution says number one priority should be education. It should be the number one
the largest budget
item of expenditure. So this proves that the budget is hindi na follow yung Constitution.
Davao City Representative Paolo Duterte's district received 51 billion pesos in flood control funds from 2020 to 2022 at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when resources were already under strain. The figure was revealed by Public Works Undersecretary Maria Catalina Cabral during a House Committee on Infrastructure hearing last Tuesday. Duterte, for his part, said Davao has nothing to hide and challenged lawmakers to prove whether ghost projects exist under the 51 billion peso allocation. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your Welcome back. Let's check on how Asian markets are doing this Wednesday morning. Right now, the Nikkei 225 is in the green, up by 0.3%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index up by a little more, up by 0.9%. Shanghai's Composite higher by 0.2%. And Singapore's Straits Times Index up by 0.9%. Here at home, Philippine shares rose on Tuesday, supported by bargain hunting and by optimism over a possible rate cut from the U.S. Federal Reserve. The main gauge climbed 0.3%, or by 21 points, to finish at 61.23. Value turnover improved a bit to about 6.2 billion compared to 5.7 billion in the previous session. Analysts say that the market found support from declining bond yields, even as weaker industrial data tempered gains. Investors are also positioning ahead of key economic reports and central bank signals expected this week. TSEI now faces near-term support at the 6,100 level, with resistance seen at around 6,200. Taking a look at our main gauge this morning, as of 10:19, we are at 61.47. That's a gain of 0.4% from yesterday's close. All shares index up as well, up by 0.3% to 37.01. Tracking the gains in Asia. As for the sub-indices, we're looking at a mixed picture. The financials, industrial, holding firms, and property counters are in the green, while the services and mining and oil counters are limiting the market's advance. Right now, volume traded is over 1 billion. Value traded is at 615 million pesos so far. Market breadth is bullish. We've got 72 advancers, 61 decliners, and 46 stocks unchanged. Taking a look at the currency markets, the peso opened at 57.10 to the dollar, down from its previous close of 56.98. Now, the Philippines' unemployment rate climbed to 5.3% in July, which is a reversal after months of improvement and a signal that the job market is under pressure. Now, data from the Philippine Statistics Authority shows that this is up from 3.7% in June. The biggest job losses came from agriculture and forestry, wholesale and retail trade, fishing and aquaculture, construction and accommodation, and food services. Sectors crucial for both rural livelihoods and domestic demand. The United States Congress is moving to include a proposal for an ammunition manufacturing and storage hub in Subic Bay under the draft 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, seen as a sign of deepening defense and economic ties between Manila and Washington. Philippine ambassador to Washington, Jose Manuel Romualdez, confirms the facility would be a joint venture between the U.S. government and a Philippine partner, producing ammunition to rifle rounds to howitzer, from rifle rounds to howitzer shells. The proposal was inserted into the NDAA by U.S. Congressman Ryan Zink of Montana, who Romualdez says personally pushed for the initiative after talks with Philippine officials. The provision directs the United States Defense and State Departments, along with the International Development Finance Corporation, to assess the feasibility of a forward-staged ammunition hub in Subic Bay. Alleged ghost flood control projects to questions over how public funds are being spent. And these governance issues don't just shake politics, they strike at the very core of our economy. Wasted resources, delayed infrastructure, and eroding investor confidence. Add to that the latest inflation pickup to 1.5% in August, the highest since March, at a time when the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is easing policy rates to prop up sluggish growth. Any new price shock or governance shock could tip that balance. To help us make sense of the risks and the outlook, we're joined by John Paulo Rivera, a senior research fellow at the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Hi, Paulo. Thank you for being here with us.
Hi, Maiki. Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. As an economist and as a Filipino citizen, what do you make of the wave of corruption allegations? It's headline after headline. And, here in business, we talk about GDP, we talk about inflation, we talk about interest rates, and the labor survey just came out, so we should be talking about that. But the most glaring number are the numbers being lost to leakages. What are your thoughts on all of this, Paulo?
Well, corruption is actually the one eroding the economy, but from within. It is not just a moral issue. It is not just disrespect for taxpayers' money, but it is actually an indication of economic inefficiency. Because a peso that is misused does not translate to productivity in education, in health, in infrastructure, and it also erodes public trust, which is very important for our investment sector.
Yeah, and we can just only imagine what we could have been, the goals, the milestones we could have reached economically if those leakages, didn't exist. Okay, Paolo, let's talk about structural inefficiencies or something to that extent. President Marcos says that the 2026 budget will carry no new allocations for flood control projects. What does this signal to you about the scale and the credibility of public spending?
Well, it represents structural inefficiency in public spending. And the fact that we're not doing that means that there will be no flood control projects, right? But the climate change impacts, the typhoons, will not actually wait for us to get our acts together. There will be floods. And because there was really no flood control projects to counter these effects, then it will actually just compound the problems that we are currently facing. Imagine a minor disruption due to weather instances would disrupt government work, classes, and this is actually counterproductive to what we really want.
Congressman, we had this in an earlier report. Congressman Isidro Ungab called the 2025 budget the most corrupt in Philippine history. Insertions across the board from both houses are guilty of this. They say the DPWH specifically, questionable insertions there. What does this kind of label do for investor confidence and for our fiscal credibility?
Well, in terms of fiscal credibility, the fact that we have a lot of discussions going on about this, it signals investors that there is some internal struggle within the fiscal spending, within our fiscal space. And it actually signals that these infrastructure projects that they are expecting to boost productivity may not happen in the near term. So they will become very cautious to the point that they might delay their investment activities to the country.
Yeah, the corruption is really a hidden tax, and it keeps people from doing what they want to do, from businesses, from investing, and from foreigners to really come in because they have to discount us in that way. From your perspective, Paolo, how heavy is this hidden tax, this corruption on the Philippine economy?
Well, it is very counterproductive because we do not get to harness the full effect. We call that the multiplier effect, or even the accelerator effect of these intended projects to bring to the economy. Imagine we are targeting 6% GDP growth every year, but this is actually hampered by these disruptions due to corruption. Like for instance, we are discussing in the Senate, we're hearing cases, but then time could have been spent to discussing things that would actually drive the economy towards upper middle income status.
That's right. We have the goal to hit upper middle income status by 2027. Do you think we're on track to hit that?
Well, people know me to be very optimistic. We can still, but then economic activities could reach that, but then without the boost from investors, without boost from investor confidence, that might be very difficult for now.
Yeah, well, business has to go on regardless of the environment. And thank goodness for that. And Paolo, I just wanted to ask you, I've asked many interviewees about why we haven't broken the cycle of corruption in the Philippines. I've heard a lot of answers from we need more integrity, we need values, we need more love of country. But could the missing link be fear? Fear, a historical lack of accountability. It's very rare that we rarely see convictions. Stolen assets are rarely ever recouped. What are your thoughts on this and the historical lack of accountability, and how people are saying the 2025 budget is the most corrupt in history? Is it because we've never really thrown the gauntlet down on anyone?
Well, I would like to begin to answer that question using the value proposition of public servants. Their value proposition is actually accountability, being responsible for the budget, for the money that was given to them. However, we have to look at this from a systems perspective wherein accountability may not be expected in a flawed system. And given a flawed system, it has to be corrected. But who will correct them? We also need to look at that the flawed system should be corrected by those people who are actually benefiting from the flawed system. So it still serves as a very critical question that we have to answer, wherein the system must be changed because it is actually flawed.
Yeah.
So the question is,
they
who will?
won't police themselves. In that same token, our president, he wants to do good, and he's creating an independent commission. That's a 3-man team to really look into the flood control projects. Now, on that team, Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong and former Department of Public Works and Highway Secretary Rogelio Babes Singson are poised to sit in that 3-man independent commission. What are your thoughts on this independent commission and your hopes for what they can achieve?
Well, being an independent commission, they should be able to extract the facts, do fact-finding, be able to make conclusions out of the evidence as presented to them. However, I could see this still as the presence of external pressure for them to be able to speed up the investigation process. We need them to actually hurry up because the economy cannot wait for us to be able to reveal everything. The economy will continue, but then the facts have to be released as soon as possible.
Yeah, we're already feeling the hurt from all of this. The Development Budget Management Committee has confirmed delays in foreign-assisted ODA projects. Red flags. That means we're paying millions in penalty fees to lenders even before projects are being built. How damaging is this to our reputation, both with creditors and this budget is supposed to fund the economy?
Well, it is very damaging because the Philippines is actually spending money on something that there is no developmental output. More so, our credibility to be able to execute these projects are being sacrificed, and development organizations might see us as a country that cannot really fulfill these grants given to us. It sacrifices our reputation. There are reputational damages from being part of this scenario.
Yeah, to that end, there is some movement. Contractors tied to questionable projects are being blacklisted from the procurement system. From an economic standpoint, how effective is this? Do you think it's enough?
Well, the blacklisting, it's on the right track, but it may not be enough because the people who are actually running the companies are not blacklisted. So if you blacklist my company, if I'm not mistaken, I can just liquidate the company and set up a new one with me still being the incorporator, and the business will continue. So it has to be on a systemic front wherein both the firm and the person involved would have to be blacklisted so that it becomes more effective and continuous
Person
reform.
and the firm. That's right, because another head, well, it's going to come out in some other way. Filipinos are very creative like that. Let's talk about competitiveness and infrastructure. The Department of Transportation budget has also been cut. Major rail projects have been delayed. What are the implications for long-term competitiveness?
Well, you mentioned the keyword, which is delay. So any delay in infrastructure development will also delay productivity and will delay the growth that we have been aspiring for.
Yeah. Speaking of growth, our labor force numbers are just out. The job market was under pressure in July, which is a reversal from last month's improvement. Unemployment up by 5.3%. What do these figures tell you about the state of the job market? Well, it's just a small picture in July. And what does it tell you about where we are and where we're headed?
Well, first of all, it's actually expected given the global headwinds and the tariff. It may be due to the tariff effects. However, this is telling us that the quantity of jobs alone being produced by the economy is not enough because quality would have to come in, so the jobs would be sustained. So this is the rise in unemployment is actually a reflection that quantity of jobs alone cannot sustain a low unemployment rate.
Mm-hmm. On another front, Congressman Leandro Leviste has filed a bill to lower value-added tax from the current 12 to 10%, arguing that this would boost household income and support consumption, even if it means 200 billion pesos in foregone revenues. From an economist's perspective, is this a wise move?
Well, in principle, the lowering of VAT would actually boost consumption. However, I would like to take this from the perspective of, are we able to expand the tax base? So even if we lower tax, then the quantity of those who are actually paying taxes can compensate for the reduction in tax. Because if we are not able to increase the tax base while we are reducing the value-added tax, then it might just be a populist move.
Mm-hmm. With a fiscal deficit, 7-month fiscal deficit already above 780 billion, how much is corruption aggravating our fiscal position and raising the likelihood of more borrowing?
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of borrowing, the corruption issues would actually tend to increase interest rates because there is a higher risk premium if governance is actually weak. And this higher risk premium due to weak governance would actually increase interest rates, increase borrowing, which would actually increase the cost for both private sector and even government.
Expensive. Yeah. Speaking of interest rates, the Bangko Sentral has been cutting policy rates by 25 basis point steps. Where do you see interest rates ending the year, and what's the likely trajectory in 2026?
Well, based on my initial view of the trajectory of interest rates, we may end the year at around 5.75%, and we cannot rush the BSP.
5.75? We're at 5% already.
Yeah.
You mean 4.70?
4.75. Around that rate. But we cannot rush the BSP to actually rush the cutting of interest rates because it might also put the exchange rate at jeopardy. And given the upcoming behavior of the federal bank, what's happening in the United States, so there are a lot of pressures, a lot of information that the BSP would need to be able to calibrate interest rates to a more acceptable one.
Yeah, that said, inflation picked up to 1.5% in August, the highest since March. Looking at the rest of 2025, is this a pressure you're watching out for?
Well, not really, because the 2 to 4% target of the BSP is feasible. It can be done. However, it would remain vulnerable to external shocks, to changes in both local and international headwinds.
Yeah, that's their target from 2025 through to 2028. And yes, it will still be vulnerable to all of those headwinds. Our official growth targets this year are quite modest. 5.5, a revised lower 5.5% to 6.5% for 2025. Given the weak investment, the corruption scandals, and subdued household spending, do you think this target is realistic?
Again, I'm very optimistic. It remains to be feasible, but very challenging given that because of the corruption issues, the public trust, investor trust is actually slowing down and our investors remain to be very cautious. And without the boost from investment, then that target is really challenging.
Yeah, that's what we really need. We need those big foreign direct investments. You mentioned corruption, so I'll bring this one up. Based on official data, the president earns just a little over 400,000 pesos a month, while senators and congressmen just get around 270,000 pesos a month. Yet many believe our officials live far beyond their means. When you look at some, they rent homes or they own homes. Rent in a top subdivision would pretty much eat up all of their monthly pay, more so if it's in Makati. How does this gap affect public trust and the credibility of our institutions, Paolo?
Well, being in government, it is very important. Optics is very important as well. As a public servant, it is also very important for our leaders to be able to exercise prudence in terms of showing off lifestyle, especially that they are actually serving their constituents. And while it may come from other sources which we cannot enumerate, there is a very important role that public servants must be able to regulate themselves, to self-select.
Live within their means, and not just the public officials, their families, the children, the spouses. We've heard for calls for lifestyle checks, stricter salins, disclosure, stronger enforcement. From a policy standpoint, what kind of accountability mechanism would actually work for us?
Well, in terms of accountability, I think the first step there would be to have an evidence that heads would actually roll, given what's happening right now. And it would actually set a deterrent for other prospective individuals.
We need to instill that fear that if you do something wrong, this is going to be the consequences.
But then I would go with the systems framework wherein the system has to be changed. It has to evolve so that we can impose accountability.
Yeah. After all these scandals, long-running corruption issues, what does this say about the true state of governance in the Philippines? And this matters because governance is something that investors look to for direction.
Well, governance in the Philippines would have yet to mature so that we are able to project the Philippines as a destination for good investment, where the economy is mature enough to be able to handle all headwinds, local and international.
If foreign investors looking at the Philippines right now, if that were you, what would you be thinking?
Well, I would always be thinking of policy stability and whether the economy is actually value for my money.
Do we have that?
Well, given the issues right now, it is very important that the hearings right now would result to heads rolling, people getting penalized, and money being returned to the coffers of government. And with that, then investors would we would actually project that to investors that, hey, the Philippines is actually capable of penalizing those who hurt the economy.
Yeah, all boils down to accountability. Okay, Paolo, thank you so much for your time with us this morning.
Thank you so much.
We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. The Philippines drops to 64th out of 69 countries in the 2025 IMD World Talent Ranking. Its worst performance in 2 decades and a red flag for competitiveness. The report shows the country slipped in all major areas. from investment in talent to the ability to attract and retain workers to the overall quality of skills. One factor, a lower quality of life compared with regional peers, where the Philippines ranked just 60th globally. Experts point to underinvestment in education, weak training systems, and poor talent retention, warning that the rise of AI could erode the country's advantage in back office jobs, making upskilling more urgent than ever. President pro tempore Panfilo Lacson unveils startling revelations in a privileged speech on Tuesday, adding to the growing list of corruption scandals now putting public spending under the spotlight. One of his disclosures, 5 public works officials he calls the BGC boys: Henry Alcantara, Bryce Hernandez, JP Mendoza, RJ Domasig, and Edric San Diego. They allegedly used fake names and driver's licenses to gamble in casinos across the country using government funds. PAGCO records show the group lost almost 1 billion pesos.
Parang nakinikinita ko na, Mr. President, na nagtatawanan pa ang mga matatalinong matching na ito habang nagbibiyahe papuntang kasino, dala ang kwartang kinulimbat habang naglilimas ng tubig baha papalabas ng kanilang mga bahay ang mga pobreng taga Bulacan.
Senator Lacson says the BGC boys will face multiple charges, including malversation through falsification of documents and violations of the Anti-Graft Law, Anti-Plunder Law, and the Anti-Money Laundering Act. Big names and big money. A Senate privileged speech is shining the spotlight on families with ties to multi-billion peso government projects. At the center, a property developer in Clark now linked to the daughters of former top public works officials. Hannah T. has the details.
Former Public Works Secretary Manuel Bunoan's daughter has been linked to a property firm tied to billions in government projects. Senate President pro tempore Ping Lacson laid out the connections in his privileged speech. At the center is MBB Global Properties, the developer of the almost 1 billion peso Wyndham Garden Hotel in Clark. Documents show that its treasurer is Fatima Gay Bunoan de la Cruz, daughter of former DPWH Secretary Bunoan. Also listed in the same company is Sunshine Bernardo, daughter of retired USEC Roberto Bernardo. Ex-USEC Bernardo handled regional operations at the DPWH. He was later tagged by contractors Sara and Curly Discaya as demanding up to 25% commissions from flood control projects. The third name is Macy Monique Maglanque, president of MBB Global Properties. Her family owns Global Crete Builders, which bagged more than 2 billion worth of DPWH contracts from 2018 to 2024. According to Lacson, her father, Mayor Rene Maglanque of Candaba, Pampanga, even boasted in a public interview that he was a big contractor with billions in projects.
Ang Global Crete ay pagmamayari ng mga Maglanque ng Candaba. Si Mayor Rene Maglanque ang presidente noong 2024 na kung saan may mga kontrata na siya mismo ang pumipirma na dapat sana ay nag-divest siya.
Put together, Lacson argued that these connections raise questions about overlap between government projects and private ventures. Maglanque, Bernardo, Bunoan, 3 families, all connected through MBB Global Properties, with links to multi-billion peso government contracts and property developments.
Kaya naman pala ang palaging depensa ni dating DPWH Secretary Bunoan, isolated case lang daw ang nakita ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos sa Ghost Project sa Bulacan. Ayaw na siguro ni Bunoan na maungkat pa sa investigasyon ang Global Crete.
BNC is still reaching out to the parties for their side. Hannah Tia, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Senators Jinggoy Estrada and Joel Villanueva are now being linked to the very flood control scandal that they had been investigating. A twist that raises serious questions about accountability and the integrity of public works spending. Former Public Works Bulacan Assistant District Engineer Bryce Hernandez testified at a House hearing that the two senators received millions in kickbacks from projects in Bulacan. He presented photos, receipts, and messages that allegedly show cash deliveries and fund requests.
Sabi ni Senator Marcoleta kahapon, ligtas ka na. Hindi po ito totoo. Si Senator Jinggoy Ejercito Estrada, Senator Joel Villanueva, Yusek Robert Bernardo, at D. Alcantara. Si Senator Jinggoy po ay nagbaba ng 355 million ngayong 2025. Noong 2023 naman, ay naglabas ng 600 million si Senator Joel Villanueva.
Lawmakers have pledged to place Hernandez under protection as he continues his testimony. Top lawyer Nilo Divina, Dean of the UST Faculty of Civil Law and founder of Divina Law, is expanding beyond the courtroom into the food scene, building a portfolio of dining brands. His first restaurant, Aurora in Makati, opened in 2023 and was followed by Bistro Aurora at the podium, targeting a younger, more diverse crowd. Coming in October is Norlando's, a Filipino dining concept named after his father, while a mass-market brand, Mr. Bogchi, is being developed for franchising. Restaurant Aurora has even been notified by Michelin that it is under consideration for its upcoming guide. We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. Several countries are condemning Israel's airstrike in Qatar that targeted Hamas officials, an escalation that now threatens ongoing peace talks. U.S. President Donald Trump said hitting Hamas was a worthy goal, but warned that carrying out the attack in Qatar, a key ally of
Well, I'm not thrilled. I'm not thrilled about it. I don't have to do that. I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this, we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today.
Hamas said the strike killed 5 members but failed to assassinate its negotiating delegation. The United States sanctions cyber scam operators in Myanmar and Cambodia, a move to cut off funds from criminal networks that have grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry. The U.S. Treasury Department says cyber scammers stole tens of billions of dollars from Americans last year. It adds that criminal groups have trafficked hundreds of thousands of people into scam compounds across Southeast Asia, especially along the Thai-Myanmar border. U.S. Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence John Hurley says that the region's cyber scam industry not only threatens Americans' financial security, but also subjects thousands to modern slavery. The Myanmar junta and the Cambodian government have yet to issue a statement. Apple unveils a slimmer iPhone Air starting at $999, featuring a high-density battery and the new A19 Pro chip for better performance and energy efficiency. CEO Tim Cook called it a game changer at Apple's annual launch event. Also introduced the iPhone 17 and 17 Pro with brighter screens, improved cameras, and prices held steady from last year. The new AirPods Pro 3, priced at $249, offers real-time language translation when both users in a conversation wear them. The event comes as Apple grapples with more than $1 billion in tariff costs this quarter, a reminder that beyond innovation, global trade shifts are now reshaping tech prices and supply chains.
The products and innovations we introduce today, along with the power of Apple Intelligence, will enrich people's lives in so many ways. It reflects our deep commitment to designing industry-leading products and experiences. Because we've always believed that when something is designed with great care, with absolute attention to every detail, every material, technology, and interaction, that the result can impact our lives in powerful and profound ways.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung orders an immediate halt to a Philippine infrastructure project worth 700 billion Korean won. The project was previously denied loan support over concerns of corruption and mismanagement, but was revived after pressure from People Power Party Representative Kwon Seong-dong. In a Facebook post linked to an investigative report, President Lee confirmed that no funds from the Economic Development Corporation have yet been released. He said blocking the deal prevents wasting taxpayer money and reduces risks of corruption, while thanking the media for bringing the issue to light. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Thank you for joining us, and keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.